kami tinggal untuk beli barang kami. Mudah-mudahan bisa simpanlah sikit-sikit.
Now, in her 4th loan cycle, Ramati has expanded her business. In addition to making and selling pisang sale, a traditional snack of deep-fried bananas, she now buys bottled water wholesale to sell to her neighbors and local shops.
Sampai dari pertama ibu satu tipi nggak ada, sampai ibu udah kayak gini, sampai besar beli tanah lagi.
To give you a feel in someone else's words, not my own, of the potential impact of microfinance, including in a post-disaster environment. I also want to share my own experience. When I started 12 years ago, the first place I visited was Vietnam. In November, if any of you have traveled to Vietnam, is certainly the rainy season. To get to the village that we wanted to see, we all rolled our pants up over our knees, crawled through mud and lots of assorted other things to get to this particular village. And interestingly, what struck me was a roof and a floor. So we met the women I mentioned earlier. A lot of them were doing businesses around incense sticks. And one woman had taken the investment from her business to put a corrugated iron roof on her home and install a cement floor. She didn't increase expenditure on food. She didn't increase on education. Her children were quite young, actually. She also didn't provide incremental health care. She invested in the roof and the floor because she hoped they would impact all of those in the long term. The roof kept the rain out. The floor allowed her to clean out her house every day when the waters came up or down. And her children were cleaner. They didn't have runny noses. We went into some of the other homes. The children were covered in mud because it was everywhere. There was nothing else to do. Sniffling, they weren't able to go to school because they were sick. And I think just so simply, this person had made this choice. And you can see what the long-term impact can be when you think about poverty in its holistic sense. In terms of sort of statistics, what statistical scientific evidence is there about impact of microfinance on poor people's lives? I don't want to belabor the point between men and women, but a study in Bangladesh that was done and rechecked probably about 6 or 7 times found that for every 100 taka that was borrowed, a woman who would use that money would get a 20% return that would then be invested in the family. That incremental return on the loan or investment that they make goes away in the case of the man. In terms of nutrition, there's a lot of measurement around calorific intake, but also the circumference of the arm. Particularly in Africa, there have been studies that have shown that microfinance and the incremental income it generates improves nutritional and calorific intake. Also better health services, and particular education for children and education for girls. The other one, again, that I keep coming back to is an issue of feeling empowered, a sense of individual confidence and pride. And when I go to places like India, where you meet very poor women who have not had an opportunity. You meet some who are very strong and they may be even participating in village leadership, but others who hold their shirts over their head and block their faces and won't look at me, certainly. And so these are some of the examples of how does microfinance change lives. Microfinance has been around for a long time. Almost 100 million poor people are estimated to have access. Of course, we still have a huge gap between those who need access to finance and those who will get it. But also, when we talk about social enterprise, I think about microfinance as the first example of a social enterprise focused on reducing poverty that has grown or scaled to any type of material size. But there are many, many other social businesses in areas of health, in areas of education, in energy, that can do similar things to empower poor people to transform their lives. So as Grameen Foundation, we sit here and think about well, what does the future look like? And as our CEO often says, how do we change the sort of playing field in which the poor operate? So as we think about microfinance, it's not just about access to loans. It's not just about access to financial services. Microfinance represents a platform. It represents probably one of the greatest kind of connections we have, human to human, in the world between sort of the developed world and or institutions that serve them and poor people. How do we use that to serve them better? And I want to talk about one particular example. Some of the businesses that I talked about, purchasing a milch buffalo, doing incense sticks. At some point you start to reach, and this may not be the perfect term, something like a glass ceiling. How do you get beyond that? One of the things we found is that people who diversify their businesses have a lot greater chance of not only moving out of poverty, but staying out of poverty. And so one of the things Grameen Foundation is looking at is what kind of businesses, or even franchises, think about it in the context of yourself. The way someone helped me really understand the idea of micro-franchises, he said to me, you know, Jennifer, I couldn't run a restaurant. I couldn't start up and run a restaurant, but I could probably run like a Subway franchise or a Starbucks franchise. I bet you I could run a shop when someone gives me the books that tell me what I should do and how I should do it and give me a brand. And that's exactly what is probably the next big thing that is being explored in microfinance today, is how do you create businesses that essentially come in a box. And so, as I say here, collaborating with the poor to develop solutions that empower them. We're doing something in Indonesia, and I didn't know a lot about technology when I took on this role a year ago. I have a lot of experience in microfinance, but technology was new to me, and I thought to myself, okay, you give them a box, you give them a phone, and you give them a sign. I don't really get how this is transforming lives, and how does this actually work? So let me tell you about my experience. Essentially what these families are doing is they're selling airtime. We're used to post-paying for our mobile bills, but in developing countries, everyone prepays for their phone usage. And poor people, just like in all cases, they can't buy the supersized jug. They need the small incremental access. And so essentially what we've done is create a business for poor people. You can see in this photograph, these people are actually doing a couple of different things. There's some candies here, I think there's vegetables here, some noodles. They had like 2 canisters of LPG there that they were selling as well. But essentially it creates an opportunity for them to develop another business line that they can offer. In this case, this family had increased their daily income by 30% by selling airtime sales. And all of the sort of tools in order to do that were provided as a business in a box or a franchise. One of the things I said, well, that's interesting, okay. And I started talking to the family. In fact, this time I was talking to the husband. And I said to him, well, of all the things you're doing in your shop, which one is the most profitable? And you know, I'm like, oh, I went to college. I know what profitable means. And this guy sort of shot me down. He told me that the airtime business was the most profitable. And I thought, he's probably just saying that because we're here. And so I said, well, why would you say that? What is it about that? And he said to me, when you have something that's profitable, it means that you can rely on the income every day. That's the hardest thing for us. We never have a steady flow of income we can rely on. We need the steady flow. And this 30% every day has been very predictable for us over 3 to 4 months. It's allowed us to plan differently as a family and as a small business. And so he really taught me that profitability is not necessarily for a poor person what the return on every dollar is, but actually how predictable the money coming in is. That was a very powerful moment for me. And we're doing a lot of thinking about this in Indonesia and particularly in the Philippines. And more importantly, looking at how we can create those opportunities for the poorest people. Because if we really want to reach them, wouldn't these kinds of tools be sort of extraordinarily powerful? And this is where we're putting a lot of our energy these days. I have 2 more slides and then we can open it up to questions. I wanted to give you a bit of a sense for who Grameen Foundation is. You've been hearing our name. I talked about it when I started. Grameen Foundation is based in the U.S. We started in 1997 with some microfinance of our own.